Hello, welcome to the Studio Talks. My name's James Swift.
I'm Josh McNorton, and our guest today is...
Oh, hello, it's Jaki Florek here.
Hey, Jackie, you okay?
Ish, as much as I ever am.
Oh, no. How are you doing within the lockdown, and what advice do you have for people who may be struggling?
Lockdown's meant an awful lot of different things, not because of lockdown itself, but the way people have reacted. Lockdown's been no different for me, really, because I don't really go out much, and I'm always very busy doing stuff, all sorts of stuff at home. A lot of it for the studio, of course. But I intend to try and make some more time for me. I need to do less for the studio, I think, and do a bit more creatively for myself. I'm determined to get my kiln wired in. It's just sitting there and all my stuff that when we moved to this house, I moved all my ceramic studio here as well, and just haven't had time to work in it.
So, how did you get involved with the Queen's Hall Studio?
In about 1996-97, we started a sort of like group of musicians and creative people, inspired by Roy Jones, who's the music officer for the area. Almost immediately we started getting just people together and making things happen in Halton. Venue at the Vic, acoustic gigs, band gigs, and then quite soon we were working with young people because they turned up to one of our meetings. We used to have meetings at in the back room of the Kingsway Hotel that's just near the studio. And a load of young people turned up and said, "We've got nothing." And so we started working with young people. And Roy Jones arranged that we could have this studio on Saturdays, and Greg Oldfield ran the under-18s music workshops until it closed in 2004. And then the main thing at the last meeting in the Kingsway was, oh God, what are we going to do? We need to find a way of reopening it. And so that was like 2004. Young people massively joined in with harassing the council, and young people can harass like grown-ups can't. Fabulous. So, yeah, 5 years later, we managed to get the council to agree to transfer the building to Luce to run as a sort of community arts and music venue. And then we had to mend it, and they would only transfer it if I could find over £500,000 for repairs. So that's what I did. Yeah, so basically it was me and Stuart Johnson who managed the renovation of the building, because there were like holes in the roof and it was full of pigeons. The actual grant that we managed to get, took about 18 months because there were so many different stages. You don't just get given money. And there was just so much work to do. It needed a new roof and new floors and new walls. And we didn't have enough money to replace the front windows that were all boarded up. But we reopened it in 2010. And in 2015, I managed to get some more money for the windows. So now it's got beautiful arched windows in front. And it looks like an old church, which is sort of what it was. It was a Sunday school that was built in 1879. And I do just love old buildings. They've just got a power about them, and a sense of stability. And so, 2010 we reopened the doors to the public, and now in 2020 it's our 10-year anniversary.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
like
just...
lockdown stopped all the amazing things Lou and everybody were planning for the celebrations, and it is something to be celebrated for.
Definitely so.
Like, yeah, keeping a building open and functioning when you're not even proper grown-ups is quite a feat, really.
Was there a level of, like, were you scared at any point being that in control, if that makes sense, of that building?
I'm never scared. There's a saying it's attributed to a lot of different people, but persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And I saw that as part of, I'd never heard that before, but I saw that as part of a painting in an exhibition in Keith's Wine Bar in Liverpool when I was interviewing someone for the Eric's book, because I do a lot of writing. So I link interviewing, oh gosh, I can't remember his name, that's stupid Ken, for the Liverpool book. And all around me was all these really brightly coloured paintings with quotes and words in. And I do like words in visuals. They work nicely in paintings. And I took photographs of the paintings, and there were things like nothing in the world can take the place of persistence, and talent will not, genius will not, education will not. And when I looked up those sayings, they were first of all attributed to somebody called Calvin Coolidge, and then I found, no, to Thomas Edison, and then I found out actually the lectures delivered by somebody called Kate Sanborn in the early 1890s on what is genius, and she defined it as a mix of inspiration and perspiration, like hard work. But we never hear her name. It's just, if you Google it, it's always Thomas Edison that comes up. I warned you not to let me waffle.
No, waffle on, seriously. It's interesting. It's really interesting.
And then I had to find the guy who had done the exhibition, and he was a really cool black guy in Liverpool. And I was desperately trying to find his name, and I couldn't, because I only thought about it about 10 minutes before we started this. And I've got so much in my head all the time. It's I can't always remember things when I need to, but I'll probably sit up in the middle of the night tonight and go, of course it was. What were you asking me?
So what inspired you to work so hard on the studio opening back up? Like, was there a specific an event that made you think, I want to work on getting this back open?
Well, there's two things. One is I've always been massively busy all my life, and about 1996 I'd got very ill and I had to leave my job. I was a lecturer in Halton College in the arts section, and so since probably 1979 I'd been in bands. So I'd been in bands, and I had children, and I had a full-time job in the art college, and I did part-time work. And when I say I was in a band, it's like a touring band, so I'd frequently do a day's work, get in the van, drive 100 miles, sound check gig, party, drive home, have a wash, going to work. And then I got really ill around 1995, 96, and I had to leave work. And I'd never actually really been that involved in the local music scene. We was, you know, we did a lot outside it. So it was a good time. I wouldn't normally have had time to get involved, but it's a good time to get involved in local creativity. And we have Roy Jones very much to thank for that. He was the new music officer in the olden days when we had money for things like arts teams and such like. And he was a wonderful person, very inspirational, and he got a lot of, he just went round Halton finding musicians and bringing people together, not just musicians, like sound engineers and theatre people and anybody, everybody. Because I had time, which I didn't ever have before, I had time because I was too ill to work. And because of Roy Jones, and because Greg doing the under-18s workshops at the studio, it was just a lot of young people got so involved. It was like a community of young people. And obviously there were loads of other things going on as well with Loose and the magazine feedback. So in 2004, when it closed, it really was that thing of like, right, we've got to get it open again. And I was a bit on my own in that, apart from Stuart Joynson and Greg Oldfield, because I think people didn't really believe it could be done. We all hoped it would, but I just always see things as a challenge. It's like, oh, you can't do this, and it's, oh, I can.
Was there a side of like rebelling, kind of, where you was told you can't do it, so you wanted to do it even more?
Yes, absolutely. I was born like that. I was expelled from school. Yes. Don't tell me I can't do something. But yes, it was a combination of having the time to focus on it. And it did take a lot of time, and the perseverance of having meetings with the council, like this is over a period of 5 years. You know, 5 years.
A long time, that.
Nobody else does things for 5 years. Well, they do.
No, but that's an awful long time to work on it, isn't it?
Yeah, just to try and get it back on its feet.
Well, back on its feet, it was you know, we've got the pigeon sort of emblem at the top of the
top, yeah.
Top of the outside of the building. There's a circle, and the artwork in that was done by Greg.
Yeah.
And a good friend of ours, Paul Chambers, got it printed out, and then our Jake, my son Jake, and my husband Bill and Paul Chambers puts it in the circle at the top of the building when we had the scaffolding up for doing the new windows. And it was a bit of a team brainstorm, was that, like, what image shall we use? I'd previously done a sort of a Celtic sun when we first opened it. But the pigeon is just, it's so apt because the place was absolutely full of pigeons. There was no electricity. There was water coming in through the roof. The place was full of pigeons. Everything was rotten. And one of the things we had to do for getting the grants to repair it, it was government money, but administrated by the Big Lottery Fund. And one of the things was we had to have a community meeting with the Big Lottery Fund officer and then show him the building. I was just so sure he would think it's not possible. But I bought a suit, a pinstripe suit. The jacket was from one charity shop and the trousers were from another charity shop. And I sort of like did my best. And I was like talking to him quite well as we were walking through the Old Queen's Hall and the studio and avoiding puddles. And then a pigeon flew at me and I screamed and leapt into his arms. And I think that bonded us a bit. There's 100 tales, even just to do with getting the studio, but we got it and got the work done. But the £600,000 that the council had stipulated we needed to raise for the repairs, that was assessed in 2004, and we couldn't start the work until 2009. So that's like 5 years of a building locked up, boarded up, with a leaking roof, full of pigeons, occasionally people breaking in, and of course their costings would have been double that at that time. But I was stuck with this budget. So, but we worked very well with the building company that I got in. And towards the end of the, when the main work was done, I just said, well, can I source everything, the fixtures and the fittings, because I knew I could do it cheaper than them by looking around and get what we wanted rather than what they chose. So it was like the toilets and the kitchens and just everything, carpet, furniture, equipment. And as time went on, it was like I had to look in. I don't know whether eBay was going then. I got a lot of stuff off. Is it Gumtree that does a lot of second hand?
Yeah.
So although it wasn't supposed to be, a lot of the stuff I got was second hand but sturdy. Just so as we could get it done. So yeah, total determination and lots of support from Stuart Joinson. I can't emphasise that enough. And Greg being the wise person, the third person that we go to say, what about such and such? And he'd say something and we'd go, oh yes, you're right. And it works very well.
So while we're still on the topic of the studio, what would you say the biggest hurdle the studio's had to overcome since reopening?
Staying open, because people do not understand at all what's involved. And I mean, we didn't, otherwise we probably wouldn't have taken it on. But it's all the stuff like health and safety, because it's a public building, and water and electric and gas. Something's always breaking, and then you find out, you have to have a electric certificate every 5 years or 6 years or something, and you're finding out as you're going along what is needed and what's required and how to do it, and things like I worked very hard to sort of like have what I've got, like my own house, and it occurred to me I wasn't going to lose it, so I looked online about forming a company, and we could form a different kinds of companies. And so it was a limited by guarantee company that I set up. So Loose is the company, but it's not got shareholders and things. It's a non-profit company, so any money that's made goes straight back into the company. Nobody's paid out of it. It was just a big adventure in a lot of ways, and also I do like finding out about things. So I was quite happy to just find out how to do this, how to do that. Some might say I'm obsessive about finding out information, but hey.
Can I ask, because I've literally always wondered this, and I don't know that I've asked anyone, to be honest, and I think you might be the best person to ask. Why did you call it Loose?
My son Joe was in a band called Lazy Mary with Wayne Cookson, who was his best friend in school. And Wayne does the creative writing stuff at the studio now. So my son Jaki Florek and Wayne Cookson were in a band together called Lazy Mary. And in the same way as I did with my band's self-releases and finding out how to do things, they released a single on their own label, and Joe called it Loose. And so we stole the name off our Joe and Lazy Mary.
Nice.
But I think their first single came out, I think maybe 1982. I can't remember, I'm hopeless at dates. But it did get John Peel radio show airplay, Radio 1 airplay. And I do hope that Joe recorded it, but it was something like, do you know who John Peel is?
Yes, because he's the one who, I might be making this up now, is he the one who did we interview the other?
I'm going to let you struggle here, even though I could help by saying Mark Whitby.
Mark Whitby, yeah, we interviewed him and he was talking about John Peel. Yes.
Yeah. John Peel was an amazing person, and you must find out more about him and try and listen to, if you find any of his old radio shows. He was actually from Liverpool, but didn't live in Liverpool. He's an amazing chap, and he had his own radio show, and he played whatever he chose to play. And it could be somebody massively famous, and it could be a band called Lazy Mary from Runcorn. And his introduction to it was, I think he played very obscure stuff as well, and it was something like, from Haiti to Runcorn with Lazy Mary, and it's a phrase similar to that that's always stuck in your head. And yes, so our Joe's band, Wayne's band, Lazy Mary, was on the Loose label, which was their own label, but then they got signed and had other stuff out. But loose was just such a good word, because you need to leave things a bit loose. You need to think and plan, but you also need to leave things a little bit open and loose for things to happen. So that's why it's called Loose. Which reminds me, originally the group was called Feedback for a very short time. Right. But then we started the magazine that was called Feedback, and we thought, we better have a different name for the music collective. So that's when the music collective became Loose, and Feedback was the magazine. And some of the same people were involved with Loose and with Feedback, but there were also some people involved in Feedback that weren't involved in the music side. Right. but it was brilliant. And again, it was like in the olden days when the council had a bit of money to spare on young people and arts and stuff like that. So after we'd sort of been bringing out a really poxy version of it, sort of like stapled together and really badly printed, the council agreed to fund it, the printing of it, if we also included all of their arts. And that was the time when they opened the Brindley as well. So I did the editing, but there could be 20 or 30 local people contributing to it. Reviews or poems or ideas or whatever. And also at that time, our Joe was in Japan. He was living in Japan, lived in Japan for 5 years. So he became our man in Japan. So he contributed to it from Japan, like music scene stuff. And another person who'd been very much part of the local music scene, and I can't remember his name, which is awful of me because I know him very well. And he was in Greg's band, Great and Lady Soul, keyboard player, and he moved to America, and so he contributed to the magazine as well from, I think he was in Alabama at the time. So we had a lot of people contributing it, not just local, but people who had been local but had spread around the world a bit. And it was good for young people as well because they got documented the under 18s gigs that we put on. Somebody would be taking photographs, mainly me, but other people as well. And some of the young people would do a review of the gig. So it was a lot of things going on, but all interconnected and a real force for good and creativity and community. I can't remember what you asked me.
I think it was why did you call it loose?
Yeah.
Yes, that's why we called it loose. It's a good word.
So what is your change the subject just a little bit, what is your personal history with music?
I've always known, even though I didn't know what an art college was, I always knew that I had to go to art college. I got expelled from school, but I got into art college. But then they asked me what my qualifications were, and I didn't know you had to have O-levels and things. And then I had our Lisa when I was 16, 17. So I just had to get some O-levels. So I got a baby under one arm and 12th night in the other. Got the minimum required 5 O-levels. Got to art college. And music was very, very important. So like my young teenage years were the Beatles, the Stones, but also old blues musicians that were coming over, and Bob Dylan. So music was really, really important, and art was really, really important. I didn't actually get into a band until I was about 30, but I had so much else to do. And it was a horrible band, and there was horrible people in it. But some of the people were good. It was quite an experience. We did a lot of gigs. And then after that ended, I started a new band with lovely people in it.
Was it like an automatic, like polar opposite feeling, essentially, where because you was working with different people you liked?
Absolutely. And that's how I met my husband, Bill. So we were just starting this new band up, and Tim Scott, who's now a Granada news reporter, he was on guitar, and he said, "Is it okay if I bring my mate down because his band's just folded?" And I said, "Yeah." And Bill turned up on the doorstep, and so I kept him forever.
Oh. Oh.
And so we that was Adam's family, and it's like Adam apostrophe S, Adam's family sort of thing. And that had lots of different people in it, but that band lasted about 20 years. Just people coming in and out. God, at one time it grew to be a 7-piece. And that was hell trying to organise rehearsals, yeah.
Talking to one musician's hard enough.
Yeah. But there's only 7 days in a week, and if like everybody can not make one day a week, you're really messed up, she says. Swear. So Adam's family was a lovely, ongoing, ever-changing sort of band, but people did stay for long periods of time. Our drummer Brian, he'd been in a Liverpool band called the Accelerators, and I think he would have been in the band about 7 years.
Huh?
We did all the usual things, sort of like touring and self-releasing things. Played the Marquee a few times in London. Did a lot of work, and I always did the lyrics. And how we wrote was the band would jam, and I'd just put something to it, and we'd record like the session, and then I'd write it, and then Bill would arrange it. Words are very, very important to me. I really do love words. And it's sad because it's only fairly late on that you're working with like PAs and sound engineers that got you a really good sound. I can remember something with my mum. I didn't see my mum very often, and I was showing her a video of the band, and she said, "I can't make out the words, I can't make out the words." So I sang them to her as the video was playing, and she said, "It's like poetry." And I'll never forget that, because it's so important, to have something from your own mother. It's like, it's lovely. And yes, it's poetry. Even though it was often shouted and screamed.
I completely agree with that. I like one of the first people I show a new song to is my mum, because I know for a fact that if it's bad, she'll go, but like most of the time she goes, "Oh, that's great." And
it's important for your mum or your dad, or your husband or your friend or even your children to sort of like approve of you, because that matters, and they wouldn't say it if they didn't mean it.
Definitely.
They'd say, "For goodness sake." One of my strange discoveries was somebody puts one of the songs on YouTube, and it was the song was about death, really, and it was like, "Are you ready?" And it's 2 vocals. It was, "Are you ready?" "Yes, I'm ready and waiting to come along with me." And somebody had put that up on YouTube because it was the record they chose for their first dance at their wedding. And it's like, oh my God. And it's that thing that everybody always says, you can write something, but there's an osmosis that occurs. What you put out is only completed by the observer or the listener, and they make the whole thing. So it's partly what you put out, and it's partly what people take from it.
Okay.
So yes, so they had their first wedding dance to a song about death, and the middle eights was something like, "For the atheist, it is the end. For the believer, the beginning. For the agnostic, it is the sound of silence." And they had their first wedding dance to that.
Kind of like hauntingly beautiful though. Like,
It sounded better with guitars and bass.
this is the best day ever, but you know, we are going to die someday.
No, but you've got to think, are you ready? And you're never going to be ready, I don't think. And I'm very aware of this now, with my mum-in-law dying, and with looking after, and my mum and dad died years and years ago, and I'm in my 70s, and it's like, I still haven't finished doing stuff, and there's no way I've got another 50 years, and you won't understand that in your bones until you do another 50 years. It's very, very weird. It's weird getting old. It's weird being young. It's weird looking back. Life is weird.
It really is. So anyway. Shall we move on?
I was like, Josh, how are you going to ask the next one?
What inspired you to write about the local music scene in books such as Bridge Over the Muddy Waters and Liverpool Eric's? Is that right?
When I had to leave work because I was ill, after about 3 years, I started improving a bit and I could do a bit more. And I started writing for a national music magazine, and that got me into gigs for free and things. One of the nicest interviews I did was at the Crazy House in Liverpool when Placebo were playing there. But it was good because I got paid for it. So I got paid and we got into gigs free, and I got to talk to people. Because I was a lot more outgoing than I am now. I can't be bothered, it takes too much energy. Apart from this, of course. So years before that, I'd written a play sort of premise that I'd sent to Channel 4, and they said, "That's brilliant, now send us a couple of episodes." But I didn't have time, and I didn't know how to write scripts. So I've just always loved writing. And then the Eric's book was somebody else's idea. It was Paul Whelan's idea, and he came over to interview me because I used to go to Eric's and had played at Eric's in the band that I used to be in. And so he interviewed me, but he just ended up with boxes of tapes of interviews with no links, just random. And so I said, "Oh, well, give them here and I'll turn it into a book." But then I had to do more interviews in order to link the ones that he'd done. But it took 9 years. 7 years. It took 7 years. And it came out in 2009 and it sold out. It's enormous. The book was £25. It cost more than that to post it. So people were paying an extraordinary amount because it went like to America and Australia, and postage just in Europe wasn't too bad. But once you got out of Europe, the postage was massive. It went everywhere, and that was very community as well. I couldn't go as often as I'd have liked to, because I was working full time. I was a single parent, I had children, and I was in a band, so I didn't have much time for sort of like hanging about. And but Eric's was a community, and it grew bigger and bigger because more and more people contributed to it. And then it was Roy's idea, Roy Jones, who's the music officer in Halton, that got loose together and feedback together. It was his idea to do a book on the local music scene. The title of it came from Pete Bentham, who's was a massive part of the local music scene, and is still a massive part of like the Liverpool music scene. Is an amazing person. So the title Bridge Over Muddy Water came from Pete Bentham, and that had a little nod to Muddy Waters that was like one of the old blues bands, blues guitarists, and also obviously to the Mersey, because it divides Runcorn and Widnes, which is like part of Halton, with a big river running through it. I'm very nosy. I like to know things. I like to find out things. So it was lovely for me to just talk to people and interview people and find people, because you can't normally sit in a pub and say to somebody in conversation, so why do you wear your hair like that then? Or
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But if you're interviewing them for a book, you can ask all sorts of questions. And so I taped them and then wrote them up and made a book out of it and divided it into 3 parts. Because it started off just as like 80s music scene in Halton, but me being me, it was like, well, what else came before that, and what else came before that? And the Beatles played the Queen's Hall, and before that, and soon it was like 100 years ago, and the marching bands and the brass bands and the choirs, loads of choirs in Runcorn and in Widnes. So it's divided up into 3 sections. The only trouble with it was it was beautifully designed by Gary Gleavy from Zen Baseball Bat and his partner at that time, Hazel Roberts, who is a graphic artist as well. So the design was beautiful, the content was really good, but it was rushed off me. The Eric's book took 7 years. I had to do this one in less than a year. And it wasn't proofread properly, because you can't proofread your own writing.
No.
You need somebody else to look at it and say, oh, that doesn't make sense, or whatever. So it's full of horrible typos. And I'm so proud that there's only one in the Eric's book. And when it was delivered to the house, like over 1,000 copies, and I opened the first book proudly, and there was the typo. I opened the book for the first time at the page that there was a typo on. Always get stuff proofread.
There's a thing called Gaiman's Law, and it's about Neil Gaiman, and it's the law says that when an author opens their book for the first time, the first thing they'll see is a typo.
It's true, but fortunately that was actually the only typo in that book, whereas Bridge Over Muddy Water, whatever page you open it at, there's mistakes.
Do you think writing has always been a part of you? Because I know, as you said before, that you just love writing. Ever since I've known you, I've known that you adore writing. Do you think it's just always been a part of you?
It has. Where I was born and my first few years, it was, I lived with my granny and granddad in a tiny little one down terraced house, back to back, no garden. And it was a little tiny village outside Bradford. And there wasn't other kids, and I didn't have friends, and my mum and my gran taught me to read and write. And then we moved, they built a little council estate on one of the fields nearby, and so that me and my mum moved on to the council estate. And we never had any money or anything, so I used to just go around knocking on people's doors, asking if they had any old books or comics, because I couldn't stop reading. And so I read everything from like Bunty to Hotspur to highly unsuitable novels like Streetcar Named Desire, to just anything I was given, I read. And I used to make my own little magazines as well.
Brilliant. That perfectly leads into the next question as well. So what inspired you to write the Feedback magazine?
I don't know. I didn't do much of the writing. I did the gathering of it and the editing, patting it into shape. Because I do like patting things into shape. It just seemed to be the right thing to do at the right time, and it's lovely because it did document a period of time, and there was no. I know why it started, because obviously there wasn't things like Facebook and people didn't have computers and stuff. Things were happening, but nobody knew about them, and so that was one of the reasons the magazine started, was to promote local artists and events and things. I encouraged others to contribute, but it wasn't like my writing.
So would you say that it was there to like fill a gap that wasn't there? No, that wasn't filled.
You have it away with words. It filled a gap that wasn't filled. Yes, it's still a gap. And there was a young lad, oh God, what was he called? I know what he was called, and I can't remember. And he knew how to work computers. He couldn't spell. He was absolutely hopeless. But he was a smashing young lad, and he knew how to work computers. And that was brilliant. That was for the first few like homemade ones that we did. And then when the Ian, he was called, possibly Ian Jones. And then when we got the council to fund the printing of it, it just went up a massive notch. We did the first quite good one when to cover the Halton show. There used to be that big Halton show on Spike Island every year. But as time went on and like money got more and more scarce, the Halton show finished. But yeah, so it was sort of like we proved that we could do a decent, proper, real magazine by doing a Halton show edition, and then we did that for the next 8 years. Would
you say that there's a I don't want to say gap that needs to be filled again, but do you think that there's a gap for that now? Since
in a different way. Louise sends out and Meg send out a newsletter by email, so you've got to be on the email list. But I mean, that's dead easy. Just if you put the place to send the info at the Studio Witness email, and put a bit underneath this for people to get on the mailing list, and then people get to find out what's coming up and how to join this, and are you interested in that, and when there's meetings where you can turn up and discuss things. So the emailing list is good, and Facebook.
I was going to say social media kind of, we've done very good at that, haven't we? We've got a poster for like every day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Social media's took over the whole thing, the whole like print business anyway, do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
I can't remember the last time I've read a magazine. I just read it on the actual like, internet.
I read them. Yeah, you're right, Josh. So much is just at the touch of a button to find out about things or what's breaking news or whatever, and also like with Wayne doing the creative writing and the group growing, and some wonderful writers in that group, and the collections that they put together, and then the Kindle book that they brought out on Amazon, and now they've got like an actual paperback book out. So yeah, everything is available digitally, but there is no substitute to having. I've always got books around. There's no substitute to an actual.
I was just going to say, there's nothing like a good new book smell, is there?
Yeah, proper words and pages and paper. This is a book that I happened to be talking about to Wayne the other day. I said, I can't remember why I've got this, because I will read anything. But mainly I read biographies and autobiographies and factual books, not fiction. But we used to go away to India quite a lot, very, very cheaply. None of your Ponzi hotels or anything. And I used to take like a couple of pairs of knickers, some sun cream for my nose, and 2 bags of books. And that had sort me through like a couple of months in India. But I'd have read the books within the first 2 weeks, because it's lovely to sit out. In India, there's like little shack bars anywhere and everywhere. Even if you can't see another human being for 100 miles, you'll still find a little shack where people will serve you tea or food or beer or whatever. So after I've finished reading what I've brought with me to India, then I'd have to go looking, and there'd always be sort of like little stalls set up here and there where backpackers and travellers would unload the books they'd read and pick up new books for them to read. So that's what I do as well. But you wouldn't have a massive choice, because only maybe 4 of them were in English. So through that, I would end up reading some very peculiar books that you would never in a million years go, oh, I must read that. It was like, oh, that's in English, that'll do.
Right, okay.
You know, there'd be German and Israeli and French and anything. And this actually is a book that I was discussing with Wayne the other day, because I was saying it was such a wonderful book, especially for young teenagers to read. And it's just called Face, and I could remember it was called Face. And I couldn't remember who it was by, but I knew where it was on bookshelves. And I went straight to it, and it's by Benjamin Zephaniah, and he's very well known as Benjamin Zephaniah. So anybody that's going, oh, who's he? Just Google him. And the book's called Face, and a lot of it is to do with like kids and gangs and a car crash and severe facial disfigurement and coping with it. Not in a gloomy manner, in a very, it's just just a fantastic, simply written book with messages, and there's not enough reading going on, I don't think.
No. I know what you mean.
I don't think so. 'Cause I said to these yesterday in one of the podcasts, I own one book and it's The Art of War.
You did, yeah, and I thought that was a joke. But
No, I own one book and it's The Art of War. This is...
Every room in my house has got bookshelves, or like in here, because this is the office that I work in. It's a junk heap. But even in here, I've got like the fireplace, the big old fireplace is like stacked with books. And even the last bookshelf we put up was in the toilet because it was the only place where there's some more space. And it's just like, I just love books. I love them. So yes, you get so much more info so easily online, but you can't beat a good paper book and sitting there in the shade and reading with no phones and just a few cows walking past and prodding at you and you flapping them away and reading in isolation.
Brilliant.
So, what advice would you give to listeners to overcome hard goals?
To persevere. Yeah, it's that thing of like, there's nothing in the world can take the place of persistence and perseverance and determination. You know, it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It can just be, that's what I want to do, and I've got to find out how to do it, and I will make sure that I can do it, and I will overcome any obstacles in the way of it.
Yeah. Awesome. So, where can people find the things that you've made online?
I haven't got anything online. I am going to start with my ceramics work again. I have to. When I was in college, Lisa was still only little, and in the olden days, they didn't mind me bringing my child in, and so our Lisa had done as much work as everybody else, even though by the time the degree was finished and you had your exhibition, she had as much work as everybody else, but she was only 5 then. I forgot what stuff I make. Yeah. So
Can people find your books online?
Eric's is out of print. You sometimes can find them on Amazon or eBay, but at ridiculous prices, and I do mean ridiculous prices, like £300. I know. I've still got some Bridge Over Muddy Water books, and there's some at the studio. There's various other books that I've contributed to. There was a book brought out by the Tate in Liverpool, and they had an exhibition on Liverpool, the centre of the creative universe, and they just invited people to contribute a piece of writing to that. And I will be starting more of my ceramic work as soon as I possibly can. But also I want to get another book. Well, I have started another book based on all the heritage projects that we did in 2015 at the studio. That was just looking into the history of the Queen's Hall. And now we want to start one just looking at the history of the studio, because as a building, as I said, it was built in 1879 and it was a Sunday school, and it's had its own history.
Definitely.
It needs documenting. So I do want to start that as soon as I can. But meanwhile, we've got things like accounts and reports and things that make the studio stay open to do.
Yeah.
I need an alternate universe and an extra me. Yeah, that'd suit. So, I'll just say one thing, James, about when we started, when we reopened the studio to the public after we'd got it all repaired and lovely. And the first proper lovely big grant I got, which is so fortunate, and it's from the big lottery fund, and it was for young people in music. And I think that's when you started coming.
Yeah, I came in the first year of that, 2011.
Yeah, so we called that Project Access All Areas. And you were so quiet. You wouldn't look at anybody. You wouldn't speak to anybody. And look at you now.
People tell me to shut up most of the time.
Oh, dear.
No, it's sorry, go on.
I just said it was good. It was good.
No, it's definitely. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that. Like, I don't know who I'd be if the building wasn't around, because I'd be a completely different person.
You'd have grown into yourself eventually.
I guess so, but I mean, I don't know. Like, that was a lot of me, where it was a lot of school. I was just sat in the corner, hoping not to be noticed.
Hoping not to be noticed. I remember, even though you didn't chat or look at anybody or anything, you used to dye your hair and you had a different pair of trousers for every day of the week.
Yeah.
Quite outrageous.
No, because it was weird, right? Because the podcast has suddenly become the evolution of James. I'm sorry. No, it was how I see it is.
I heard you talk so much.
I left school, and I all of school, because any time I was noticed, it was something bad. Like, someone would go, "Oh, you've got this," or whatever. So, like, I left school, and the way I see it is, I suddenly wanted to be noticed for good things, like for music, or the fact that I've got a silly outfit on or something like that. And also the outfits. I always thought of the outfit as, I like talking to people, but I don't like being the person who goes, "Hello, do you want to have a conversation?" So the outfits was kind of a, please come and talk to me and ask me what the hell's going on with me.
I'm going to start on you now, Josh.
Go on then.
I'm turning the tables. What did you think when you first came to the studio?
Well, when I came, when I was younger, we had a band. There was like 5 of us who just used to sit there and not do anything. We just used to sit in a room. And then it was a good build. It was a good atmosphere then. And then joining the studio now has become one of the best things that's ever, not ever happened to me, but like since my mum died, I was very depressed and I had no job for 2 years. Then I got this job, and then it's changed my life so much. Like, I'm more outgoing now, and I feel like I feel like I've got a family now, like beside my real family, but I feel like I've got the work family, and it's some of the amazing people I've ever met.
I think that's it, isn't it? Like, in this podcast, we've called it a community and all that stuff, but it's a complete family. Like, I mean, it is.
That's something that, because I worked at Halton College for probably about 18 years before I got ill and left. I mean, I've done 100 other jobs before that, but to me, that was like a family. The art section was like a family, and we didn't get the high-flying students. We got all the strange people and the odd people and the people that had always wanted to do art but hadn't got round to it until they got divorced and were 50 and suddenly could do what they wanted, or people that had been in prison, or people that had done very badly at school but suddenly wanted to actually do something. We got a lot of strange people and lovely people as students, and the lecturers were all it was like an old-fashioned art school. It was like a proper art school art section, and that was like family to me. And I did a lot of growing up there, even though I was quite old by that time. And a lot of people and students that I meet up with have said the same thing. It was like a family. And I think that was at the back of my mind with the studio as well.
Definitely.
Just a safe haven for strange people.
And I think that's such a perfect word for it as well. It's safe, because, as I say, in school, I hated school, and it was all I wanted to do was run away and all this type of stuff. And
I did run away. I ran away to London and lived on the streets. But that's another story.
No, but it is that way. It's the studio is such a, as you say, safe haven from anything that's the outside world, is how I always see it. Protects me from the outside world.
It does, and it also makes you part of the outside world in a safe way. So yeah, and we're very, very lucky to have Louise, and we're very, very lucky to have the super staff and volunteers that we have, and that's just been a growing thing. I mean, I love everybody that works there or goes there or is there, because it wouldn't exist. I had to take a much more of a back seat because I just haven't got energy or capability to be on site and do stuff. So it had to be handed over to somebody very special, who could work with people, who was creative, who knew things, who could find out things, and that had the massive energy to get things done. And of course Lou has that, and Jane, and loads of other people are very special people.
Definitely.
And so are you two.
Thank you.
We're all special.
Thank you for doing this. This has been really, really great. Honestly, I really enjoyed this one. And on behalf of like literally everyone who's ever walked into the studio, thank you for everything you've ever done with it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just had a little. My head's always full of stuff, and I just had a little flash then of Tank.
No, I know.
And I don't think anything should be said about the studio in this way without acknowledging Tank's contribution as well.
I mentioned, it's weird because I mentioned him yesterday, and I can't remember which episode. It was in one of the podcasts, and like there was a second where I was like, oh wow.
Yeah. There's not a day goes by without I don't think about him.
Honestly, same,
Yeah.
Probably same.
I've got his keys that's got his bottle opener on.
Oh, wow.
And I keep them in a box. And I keep a packet of menthol cigarettes in the box as well, because we both used to smoke menthol cigarettes. So I keep my spare packet in there. I always went out in the box to say, yeah, I'm just borrowing these, Tank. I'll put another packet in later. But no, Tank did add so much to the studio, and especially when we were first opening it, and the time, as time went on, and Tank will be missed every day of my life, and a lot of other people as well.
Same. I was talking to my mum about this the other day. I can't remember the conversation how it started, but she turned around, she literally went and she said, you literally mention Tank nearly every single day that we talk. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I literally do.
Right, I'm raising a glass of water to Tank.
I've drank my coffee is the problem.
Okay, and thank you very much. And you've both done very well.
Thank you.
And I listened to your very first podcast, and so I've heard it grow more confidence and
Definitely.
more structure as it's gone along.
I feel like we have got into it now. Like at first, we were both dead nervous, but now I think we're on the ball now, as they say.
It's only took us 50 episodes nearly.
Yeah, so you persisted and you were determined, and that's what gets you there.
Definitely.
Bye.
Bye. See you later.